Let's get started. Welcome to Go Paperless with Integrated Oceanic Plotting in ForeFlight. In this webinar, we're going to demonstrate how to use ForeFlight's new Oceanic Plotting capability, which is now available with the release of ForeFlight version 15.11. Let's go ahead and meet our presenters for today. Guys, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Jay. My name is Josh Pava. I've been with ForeFlight for about 5 years. I primarily work within ForeFlight Dispatch. However, I also work within our flight planning, weight and balance, runway analysis, and of course, our plotting products. In addition to my duties with ForeFlight, I also run a G450 out of California, and I'm in charge there with essentially all aspects of the aircraft management. Special note with this plotting project is that I've done about 14 crossings with the project already. So as we've matured the product, we've been able to get some of my feedback, and I'd love to walk you through it today. Looking forward to it.
All right, thanks, Josh. Hey everyone, my name is Kelsey Pittman, and I'm the Director of Product for Business Aviation. So I lead our flight deck line within ForeFlight Mobile. I've been with ForeFlight since 2017 and have worked primarily with our flight planning and performance teams during that time. So Oceanic Plotting has been something that we've been working on for quite a while now, and so we're excited to introduce it to you all today.
Hey everyone, my name is Greg Ferris. I am a product manager for iOS flight planning here at ForeFlight. I work directly under Kelsey Pittman here on the webinar today, and I've been here just a little over a year. My main experience is from the aviation operations space. I've been an international dispatcher, helping 91-135 operators make many international trips. And I've been able to utilize that experience here at my first year at ForeFlight working on this Oceanic Plotting project. So glad to be here and have our Oceanic Plotting feature ready to show today.
Thanks, guys. Taking a look at today's agenda, first we'll give you an overview of Oceanic Plotting and talk about how this feature ties into many key releases in the last few years within ForeFlight that were needed to support its development. And then we'll jump into our demo for today. First, by planning and releasing a flight from ForeFlight Dispatch. And just a note on that, ForeFlight Dispatch is a prerequisite to being able to use this Oceanic Plotting feature. After releasing the flight, we'll switch over to the iPad and we'll show you how Oceanic Plotting fits into ForeFlight's already existing Active Navlog feature. Then we'll walk you step by step through Oceanic Plotting, including logging position reports and G&E checks. We'll also get into how this information is stored after a flight, simplifying record keeping for your organization. And after that, we'll wrap up with some Q&A. Before we begin, I want to mention you can ask questions using the GoToWebinar message panel on the right side of your screen. We'll respond to as many questions in writing as we can during today's webinar. We'll also take a few of the more popular questions and talk about them live at the end. I will say today's webinar is a popular one, so make sure to ask your question as soon as you think of it. As we get toward the end of webinars, especially more popular ones, the number of questions coming in goes up, making it harder to respond to everyone. And if your question isn't answered today, you can reach out to our support team. Whether that's a question about Oceanic Plotting or anything else in ForeFlight, you can reach them by emailing team@foreflight.com. If you encounter any technical problems during today's webinar, try leaving and rejoining today's session. And if that doesn't work and you're using a mobile device, try switching to a computer. We find that the GoToWebinar platform tends to work better on computers. And lastly, today's webinar is being recorded and will be accessible by this time tomorrow at foreflight.com/webinars. So with that, let's get started. Kelsey, over to you.
Thanks, Jay. So first, I'd like to just give a quick overview of Oceanic Plotting in ForeFlight before Josh and Greg dive into a demo of how to use the feature. So I mentioned earlier that I started at ForeFlight in 2017, and Oceanic Plotting has pretty much been on our list of things to do since at least that far back. However, to get to this point, we had some foundational work to do, and in the meantime, operators have used creative means to work around this gap, like using user waypoints and annotations and even custom content packs. So our goal here was really to make this a seamless user experience so that it's a natural continuation of the work that you're already doing in ForeFlight and to eliminate the need for paper charts or bouncing around to various different apps. So one of the first steps towards plotting was to introduce the advanced flight planning capabilities needed to make an oceanic crossing. So in ForeFlight Dispatch, which was released in 2019, you'll find features such as equal time points and ETOPS capabilities, which are needed to plan an international flight. And if you ever need any assistance with your international trip planning, we also have a global team of flight planners through Jeppesen International Trip Support who can help you with anything from planning your route to setting up permits, fuel, even catering. So the next step for us was to introduce our logging capabilities, which is called Active Navlog. This is an add-on that was released in May of this year. And Active Navlog allows users to record their time and fuel actuals on each waypoint and have the flight plan update in real time as they progress along their route. Another benefit of Active Navlog is that once the Navlog has been signed, the PDF version is saved and archived in Dispatch, and block times and fuel can be exported to other third-party integrations such as scheduling systems. So once Active Navlog was released, we immediately started working on Oceanic Plotting, and this builds on top of the Active Navlog to bring in a map inlay, a digital circle tick method, gross navigation error checks, and position reports, which is what Greg and Josh are going to demo today. So as you're all aware, Oceanic Plotting is really paramount for maintaining course accuracy in non-radar environments where there's no ATC surveillance. So this feature, while it's been long requested from operators like yourselves, it really emerges from the regulatory requirements ensuring that flights adhere to their designated paths, which ensure safety and compliance over large non-radar areas such as oceanic crossings. So while this feature was designed to improve efficiency and remove one of the last remnants of paper charts in the cockpit, our development was rooted in the guidelines set forth by the FAA Advisory Circular 91-70B and the ICAO North Atlantic Track Manual 007. We also worked with many operators who were gracious enough to provide us their international operations manuals and also provide feedback while using the feature during their oceanic crossings. And so with that, I will hand it over to Greg and Josh to run through how the feature works.
Thanks, Kelsey. All right, so now we're going to find ourselves in Dispatch, and we want to start off here just so everyone can get familiar with our Dispatch product and seeing where, typically an operator is going to have their dispatch department push out flights to their crews. All right, and now we're going to put in our destination, and today we're going to head over to Luton. And let's go ahead, and I'm going to adjust this timeout a little bit here. So let's leave, we'll do 12:30 local here. And then let's go down. We're going to go down here and we will set an alternate. Let's just go ahead and use Stansted. That looks like a good option right now. And now we're going to just progress down here to fuel. So let's go ahead and we'll go over to fuel policy, and we're going to select that down to landing. And for today's trip, we will, let's say, go for 7,000 pounds on landing fuel. And then we progress down here to advanced fuel options. We're going to leave that reserve policy for EASA. And let's go ahead and we'll bump that up to 8% for contingency today. And for PIC, we're going to go ahead and set Josh that's on the call as that operator. So we're going to transition over to him next so we can dive deeper in from the pilot's perspective on oceanic plotting. And then today's trip, let's go ahead. We're going to have 4 adults on this trip. So we'll go ahead and get that load set up for that. And then going right down below that and talking about contingency planning. So we'll set up 1 ETP airport pair. So that way Josh will have something to show during the webinar here. So let's go ahead and use CYQX, and we'll use Shannon as our other pair. All right, and we'll go ahead and we're just going to select the top recommended Eurocontrol valid route here that's popping up for us. And then we'll go ahead and go down here and go ahead and save our trip. And from this point, I will go ahead and do a release over to Josh.
Thanks, Greg. So I've now received the flight within ForeFlight Mobile. We have it here on the upper left-hand side. I can click on the flight and I can see the very same values that Greg set within ForeFlight Dispatch. So we see Teterboro, London, Luton. We have Stansted as our alternate. We have a route to alternate on the left-hand side, direct to Bravo, Kilo, Yankee. We move down, we can see very briefly, we have the aircraft, our profile for flight. We're cruising Mach decimal 90. Quick depiction of our route. We can see that we have a cruise altitude set of 41,000 feet, one ETP set up under contingency planning. This is something new that you will have in conjunction with this feature. We can see that we have our ETPs set up here for Gander, Shannon. If I wanted to add another ETP pair as a pilot, I could do that by pressing the Add ETP pair, and I'd be given a user interface very similar to what we see here, where I define the two airports. And finally, I have an option here to show ETOPS rings and ETP airports on the maps views in the Active Navlog, as well as showing a PSR, point of safe return. I'll go ahead and flip those both on. And that will then take me back to the flights page. When I press the back button, we see that we have our setup of 5 people, 4 passengers, and in this case, 1 crew member. Of course, normally you'd have an SIC. Fuel policies visible here, just like we set up in dispatch. And we have all of our weights, etc. So that takes us now into sort of the meat and potatoes of what is new and how we implemented plotting within ForeFlight Mobile. I have 2 ways to get into what we're calling the Active Navlog. The Active Navlog is where plotting is done through. One of the ways we can go is if we go to the top of the screen, we press the Navlog button, and you'll see on the bottom right-hand corner, we have the Go to Active Navlog button. I can press that, and that will take me right into the Navlog or Active Navlog for this flight. We can see I have the route depicted as well as the oceanic tracks depicted with it. In the event that I don't want to enter through the flights Navlog, I can also go into the More menu and choose Active Navlog, and that will take me into this view, which will then list my flights that are upcoming. Of course, we also have the past flights options, so we could see some of the past flights that I've done as well. But of course, for today, we're interested in our flight from Teterboro. So we'll go ahead and press that one more time, and we re-enter this view that we saw just a moment ago. All right, so now that we're in the Active Navlog, along the top, we see a few buttons that are new to this feature. We have the information button, and when I press that, we get a window that has 3 tabs. So we have the flight summary tab, which has all the information you might expect that in general summarizes the flight. So where it's going to, where the destination is, the length of time, distance, winds, etc. I can go into the fuel tab, and I see my fuel table, which basically shows me all the different fuel values from destination to taxi, my minimum required, how much I'm landing with, etc. And then, of course, the weight tab. And the weight tab is showing all of the weights that are applicable to this flight. So everything from your zero fuel weight, your takeoff weight, your landing weight. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this by pressing the close button. And I will go into the kebab menu, which is these 3 dots here going horizontally that we see. And this is what we call our Active Navlog actions. And here is what I sort of think of as sort of the center of where we do most of the functions that are generic to the flight, not specific to a waypoint. So as we can see here, one of the options we have is altimeter. So if I go into the altimeter option, right away I'm pre-filled with the time that I'm doing this altimeter check. And then I have the options for altimeter 1, altimeter 2, and standby altimeter. For the purpose of this, we'll go ahead and populate a value of 55, 60, and 50. And the autopilot is going to be on altimeter number 1. When I select the altimeter number 1 being used, we then immediately get the difference in altitude that altimeter 2 shows. I'll go ahead and click back on that. Our next option is fuel check. Fuel check allows us to mark how much fuel we have at a given time. So for this flight, I'll say at this current time, I have 27,800 pounds. And I'll go ahead and click back. ATC clearance is pretty much exactly what it's what it sounds like. So I've been using this for the en-route clearance as well as oceanic clearance, in addition to any climb clearances or perhaps route revisions. So for the purpose of the demonstration, we'll go ahead and put an en-route clearance. And it would be something such as, clear to London Luton Airport via, we'll just call it radar vectors in this case. Maintain 3000, we'll expect 12410 in 10 minutes with a departure frequency of, let's say, 122.2 and squawking 1234. So once I've entered that, I can go ahead and press back. And now if at a later time I want to review that clearance, I can go right back into that same tab, and then we see that it's there. Like I said, it's also helpful if you get climb clearances or routes. You simply press the new clearance button and you can enter that new clearance right here. Remark is what I would call our catch-all. Some operators have SOPs that require them to notate certain things, whether it's what time you switch crews, or maybe it's something like you did a nav accuracy check right here. You could name it as you wish, nav accuracy, and enter what you want right there. And lastly, the ATIS, pretty self-explanatory here. So you're either entering your departure arrival ATIS as well as any information. So we could say Teterboro ATIS alpha and enter the data right here. We have timers set up right below that. So for those that like reminders about when they want to do their altimeter checks or their fuel checks, you can set the interval here. So perhaps you do at 55 minutes is when you do it. So perhaps your operation is you do 55 minutes. So you can set the 55 there. You can do very similar for fuel interval. You can set those timers to start. So start. And then now when the timer expires, you'll get a notification and be brought to the applicable screen to add that altimeter or fuel check. Finally, on the bottom, we have the reset all changes to the navlog. This button allows you to make some changes before you fly. Maybe you just want to familiarize yourself with the navlog, but you don't actually want to carry those changes into the flight. If you wanted to use that function, you would simply press reset all changes. And then at this dialog, are you sure you want to reset all changes? You would choose reset. I'm going to keep the changes I've made so far, so I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. But if, in short, if you ever get in a situation where you haven't flown yet and you just want to start over, that's where you want to do it from. And once again, that's just from the 3 horizontal dots that we're showing at the top of the screen. The last button that we have on the right is the signature line, which we'll come to at the end of the flight. So we'll review that one. So now we're going to go ahead and start in with our flight. So the way we start the flight is we enter our ramp information. In this case, like we talked about, you can add a ramp coordinates or remark if you want to note that. But for the active navlog, what we need to enter is our time and fuel. So I'm going to say that we are off the ramp at 1720 Zulu with a fuel of 27,800 pounds. So once I've entered those two, I go ahead and press close button on each entry screen. And I will move right into the next waypoint below that, which is Teterboro. So our ramp time is our out time. And of course, the airport waypoint is going to be our off time. So what we do here is very similar to what we did in ramp, but we're going to add our departure time here. So we'll say that we departed at 1732, and we had a takeoff fuel of 27,500 pounds. Now you'll note when I do those entries, we immediately show the difference or the delta. So we're 2 minutes behind our planned time, and we're 80 pounds more fuel than we plan to have. And those are color coded once you remove the focus from that waypoint. So we can see that the yellow is indicating that we're 2 minutes behind. So that's a negative. And then we have a little bit more fuel. So that's a positive. So we've colored it green. While we're in radar airspace, we have a pretty limited view to what data you're going to collect on the right-hand side. As we'll see in a few minutes, once we enter into non-radar procedures, there are many more fields that become exposed on the right-hand side. So crossing Hartford, we would record similar data to what we've done previously. You'll also note that we have another menu with those 3 horizontal dots. So if I go into there, I can see what my options are. So I can go direct to this fix. I can insert my present position. I can insert a different waypoint, or I can insert the top of climb. In addition to those, we see we have 2 buttons on the bottom, which are start on-radar procedures, which we'll use shortly. And we also have delete waypoint if that waypoint was no longer on our route. At the moment, we won't use any of those. So we'll just go ahead and record the data that we have. So we have the calculated field on the right-hand side, right around there, that says 1745. I'm going to go ahead and say we got there at 1744. So now we see that the field moves to an actual from a calculated. And for our fuel, I'll say we have 25,800 pounds. And our actual altitude was, say, flight level 310. And if I wanted to note at this waypoint, for example, that we did a crew swap, or I put JP to crew rest, and then now that would be notated on your master document at the conclusion of the flight to show who did what and when, as far as crew members are concerned. While we're here, we can also talk about the waypoint details section we see on the bottom right-hand side. This has everything that you'll need to verify your FMS positions and distance and your entered flight plan. So your course, how long the leg is between the 2 waypoints, your minimum fuel, of course, the wind, ISA, and OAT this is based off of, as well as your MSA. So at this point now, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward past some of these waypoints. So in the event that I reach my top of climb at a different sequence relative to these waypoints, for example, I reach my top of climb after Boston VOR rather than before Boston VOR, I am able to move it so the sequence of waypoints is correct. So the way that I would do this is I would go into the 3 horizontal buttons, 3 horizontal dots, I should say, and say insert TOC, and say insert TOC after waypoint. So this now moves that top of climb to the subsequent waypoint, so the order is preserved. Okay, so I'm going to enter my TOC data here, and I'm going to say that we reached a TOC at 1755 Zulu. My fuel on board was 24,900. And of course, our top of climb was flight level 410, just as flight planned. So at this point, I'm going to fast forward us towards our Oceanic entry point so we can see some of the features there. Okay, so our Oceanic entry point today is NIXO. So when I approach NIXO, when I'm doing my FMS verifications and those type of things before Oceanic entry, I go into that kebab menu one more time, and this time I choose Start Non-Radar Procedures. And when I do that, you may have seen a few extra fields come on the right side, and I also get the Oceanic symbology. So by Oceanic symbology, I'm talking the circle, the slashes, and the check mark. So for today's simulated flight, we'll go ahead and pretend that we've done a lot of our verifications already. So we'll go through this fairly quickly to get our document looking correctly. So the way that I set the first circle is I simply click right over it, and that makes the circle prominently bolded. After that, I go ahead and press the check mark. And again, that highlights then the check mark is being checked for this waypoint. And then passing over the waypoint, I'll go ahead and do my first slash. And at this point, we'll go ahead and move back to the right-hand side where we'll enter some values. Prior to NICSO, when I got my oceanic clearance, I would have estimated NICSO at 1926, for example. So estimate time at NICSO, I'll enter 1926. And then much later, when we're actually over NICSO, I would enter some information. So we'll say we actually got there at 1927. Our altitude as cleared was flight level 410. We're estimating 48 north, 050 west at 1936. The wind we'll say is 270, diagonal 52. Temperature we'll call minus 57. Turbulence, we have the option of turbulence or CHOP, so you can define which it is that you have. In this case, we'll say we have neither. And our fuel on board, we'll say we have 19,710 pounds. Of course, like we briefly talked about earlier, we also have all the information below that you would be verifying. So course, distance for that leg, etc. You'll note that we also have here a G&E check. The way that you perform a G&E check is by clicking on either one of the fields for times or coordinates. And then you have the option of using the current time or another time. For this purpose, we'll go ahead and say that it was 1937. And we set our present position. Of course, you're reminded to verify position with the non-steering FMS, which we're required to do. And the FMS allows you to see your exact latitude, longitude, of course, which you can manually enter in this field if you wanted to. If you have something like a SATCOM direct router or a Sentry, then you're going to have the option to do present position, and your position will be automatically inserted, and all you have to do is just verify that that position is correct. At the conclusion of that, and you're happy with the result or happy with the inputs, you go ahead and press record G&E check. We now say the G&E check is completed. I can do the final slash through the NICSO waypoint and any remarks that I want. So for example, slop right 2 miles. And we'll see a little bit later, the slop right 2 miles will be shown as well as the G&E check on our master document that we produce. So next up, I'm going to go ahead and populate these values to what they would be. So if you give me just a moment, we'll go ahead and make it. And this is so at the conclusion of this, our master document looks to be correct. Okay, so as we coast in, we can see we're just passing Tobor intersection at this point. And that is our coast out fix. And so, or excuse me, that is our coast in fix. So that means our non-radar procedures are ended. So we go into the 3 horizontal dots and we say end non-radar procedures. And by doing that, we remove our oceanic symbology, and subsequent waypoints don't have all the fields on the right-hand side. One thing you may have noticed as we went through this is that the order of the waypoints in the data is exactly the same as a position report. So if you end up having to do an HF position report, you could read directly from the top. So for example, we have our 52 north 020 west fix right here. You can go down and position 52 north 020 west 2150 flight level 450 estimating Tobor 2209 riled next. You can give a MET report if you want, and then you can move on from there. So it's kind of nice to be able to go top to bottom, read right off what you're seeing, and give the entire position report. Now, suppose that after riled intersection, when I coasted in, I was asked to go direct unbeg and then goal to before going to Shannon. The way that I would do that is I would go into the 3 horizontal dots and say insert waypoint. And I'm either going to insert waypoint before or after. In this case, since the clearance was after riled, I'm going to say insert waypoint after. When I'm given this view, I have a few options. So I can enter a single waypoint. I can enter several waypoints together, or I can enter airways. In this case, I'll enter unbeg to goal 2. I'll press add. So we'll note now that after RILD, we have unbeg and goal 2. In the event that I wanted to remove a waypoint, for example, after goal 2, I was told to go direct to Osgar. In other words, skipping Shannon. I have 2 ways, since I'm being told that after Shannon, or excuse me, after goal 2, essentially skip Shannon. What I can do here is I can go delete waypoint, which will then remove Shannon from my flight plan. On the other hand, assuming that my clearance might have been go direct goal 2 now, the way that I do that is I select goal 2 and choose direct to. So when I'm going to get ready to configure this direct, I go into RILD and I choose insert present position. Assuming that I've passed RILD, I'm going to say insert present position after. And I'm going to put my present position just like I did on the GNE screen. And I'll go ahead and insert that. Now I go down to goal 2 and I say direct to, and I find the latitude, longitude, or my present position that I just entered. So I say that, I press confirm. So now I've set up, so after RILD, I moved a little bit forward to wherever my present position was, and from there I went to goal 2. So that's how you do the directs using our Active Navlog. Assuming now that we aren't interested in collecting any more data, just like we have for the domestic on our departure, I'm going to move down to our arrival, which essentially landing into Stansted. I'll go ahead and populate information for our landing. So we're going to suppose that we landed at 2318 and we had fuel of 7,250 pounds. Likewise, when we blocked in, that was 2320, and we had 7,000 pounds even. Once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and press the signature button that we talked about earlier. I'm going to say add signature. Sign. If we had multiple crew members on this screen, you'd choose who is signing. In this case, it's only me. And I'll go ahead and sign the navlog. I press done. And now what that does is that puts my navlog in a read-only state. So we can see that if we scroll to a waypoint that we collected data on, I can't change the data anymore. So essentially what that's done is put me in a position where I've generated my master document and changes are no longer possible. In the event that I need to make a change, what I can do is go back into that signature button and delete my signature. Once I've deleted the signature, we can now see, as the text is blue again rather than grayed out, that I can make a change. So for example, if I actually needed to change this estimate to 2210, now it's fixed, no problem. I go back in, I'm going to add my own signature. Done. And now, yet again, the document is now read-only. There's nothing I can do to change this short of deleting the signature. At the conclusion of the flight, of course, we want to generate our master document. The way we do that is by pressing the final button, the one just right here. Looks like the document. So we now see that this PDF is completely filled out. We see the data that we've collected. We have my signature. We have our block times, any of the remarks we've made, ATIS, clearance, that sort of thing. We can see in the domestic waypoints any of the time deltas for fuel as well as time, any of the comments that I made, the actual altitudes, And then when we scroll down to the oceanic portion of our flight, we see the circle, the slashes, the check marks, our deltas. Again, we see remarks and actuals. As we continue to scroll down, we'll go into our oceanic position report section, and that's going to show us graphically as well as textually. That shows us each position report that we made. So coming back to our position report at NIXO, we see all the information we entered: times, altitude, our estimates, wind, temperature, turbulence, fuel, where we did our G&E check, when we did our G&E check, and then a graphical depiction of that G&E check. And that's available for each of the waypoints. So now that the flight is over, it does remain accessible to me in the flights list. Obviously, it's no longer an upcoming flight because it's complete. However, if I go into the past flights, like we showed a little bit earlier, now the current flight that I just finished is accessible. So we see under November 2023 in our Gulfstream G650, Teterboro to Luton, and I can click on it. We also see that it has a signed icon to the left. We have the signature with the little pen. If I click on that, then I'm just brought right back into the Active Navlog view with my filled out data. Finally, if I go back to the ForeFlight Mobile Flights view, if I scroll to the bottom of the screen, we'll note that the times, it has a flight time of 5.8, a block time of 6.0. All of our time out, off, on, and in has been pre-populated from the Active Navlog. And lastly, this same information is now available from a master document form in ForeFlight Dispatch. And I'm going to hand it over to Greg now so he can show us that.
Thanks, Josh. All right, so now we're ending our trip today in Dispatch. And just like Josh was saying, for regulatory reasons, your flights will now be archived here in Dispatch as well. And so you can see the Teterboro to Luton trip right here at the top. And you will scroll over here to status and you will see this blue sign Navlog icon. And to bring that up right here within Dispatch, you can go ahead and click, and then you will see that same PDF Navlog that Josh created in mobile showing up here in Dispatch as well. And then also looking from the flight within Dispatch, you can also access the same Navlog that Josh was just seeing in mobile in the upper right corner, clicking on that same blue Navlog icon. So you can access that as well, and then you will see that same PDF Navlog. And then going back here, I also want to highlight, if you look at the flight log section, you're going to see those same out, off, on, and in times that Josh just highlighted as well from his trip that he completed in mobile. All right, back to you, Kelsey.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. So we're really excited to have Oceanic Plotting out there and to start hearing your feedback. We announced Oceanic Plotting at NBAA this year, and so had a lot of interest when we demoed it at our booth in Las Vegas. And many of those operators, and possibly many of you, have already signed up to receive demos from our sales team. But if you didn't get a chance to attend or connect with them, you can reach out to us for your free one-on-one demo of Active Navlog and Oceanic Plotting by emailing sales@foreflight.com. And in typical ForeFlight fashion, this is just the beginning of our logging capabilities. So stay tuned for future updates, and thanks so much for attending today's webinar. And with that, Jay, I'll hand it back to you for Q&A.
Thanks, Kelsey. Before we get into some of the questions you all have submitted today, I want to mention some useful resources for you. First, you can learn more about Oceanic Plotting in ForeFlight and the Active Navlog feature that it's a part of at foreflight.com/oceanic-plotting. Next, we've mentioned it already, but again, Oceanic Plotting is only available if you use ForeFlight Dispatch. If your organization does not currently use Dispatch and you'd like to learn more, you can visit foreflight.com/dispatch. And the third link here, Kelsey mentioned earlier that if you want help with any part of your international trip planning, the team at Jeppesen International Trip Planning Services is ready to help. They can handle anything from planning your route to arranging permits, airport slots, ground handling, fuel, and much more. You can learn more at jeppesen.com/ITP. You can register for more webinars and watch past ones at foreflight.com/webinars. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the video from this webinar will be posted to that page in the next 24 hours if you'd like to share it with a colleague or a friend. And lastly, you can always reach out to the pilot support team with any questions you have, whether that's about oceanic plotting or anything else in ForeFlight. You can reach them by emailing team@foreflight.com. Now with that, let's move on to some questions. And thank you all so much for the great questions that you've submitted today. We've gotten quite a large number of them, so we're going to try to wrap up some of the bigger themes that we've seen, and in addition to answering some of the questions that we got. So, Kelsey, the first question that I have for you, and this may have been the most popular question we got, is from different operators that use third-party vendors to create flight plans. Can those be imported for oceanic plotting?
Yeah, so we do partner with several third-party flight service providers. So Jeppesen International Trip Support being one of them, as we mentioned, also Honeywell Forge and UAS International Trip Support. So if you utilize any of their services, you are able to link up your dispatch account and have them create flight plans and do your trip support directly in your dispatch account and release flights to you that way. If you're using another vendor, you would have to take the flight that they've released to you or sent to you and recreate it and dispatch yourself. So we do have a couple options there for import.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelsey. Greg, the next question that I have is for you. Someone wrote in and said that they opened their iPad, they went to the About tab and saw that they are on ForeFlight version 15.10.1, and they don't see oceanic plotting there. But we mentioned that it requires version 15.11. So could you talk a little bit about, how recently this was released?
Yeah, Jay, thanks so much. Absolutely. So version 15.11 was actually released earlier this week. So if you do have automatic updates enabled on your iPad, that should be going ahead and updating here within the next few days. But if you don't want to wait for that, you can go ahead and go into the App Store and then go to your account, do an update for your currently installed apps, and you should.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. The next question is for Kelsey again. We had several people asking about sharing the Active Navlog with a second crew member, maybe a third, depending on the length of the flight. Could you talk a little bit about if that's possible now?
Yeah, so this was a super common request as we were developing this, and it is something that is on our roadmap for early next year. It's not currently available. The current process would be that you would have to share the summary when you're finished with another pilot or via the iOS share sheet. But we are working on being able to sync the Active Navlog in real time.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelsey. Josh, the next few questions I have are for you, actually. Can you talk about what happens if there is a revised routing in the clearance?
Sure. So that's a really great question. Just like we showed earlier in the movie, in the demo, you have the three dots that are going horizontal on the top of the screen, the kebab menu. If you click those and then you choose ATC clearance, that allows you to enter a large number of clearances. So the goal during design here is that all of your clearances go within that section, and you just press the new clearance button when you've received a new clearance, and then you set a title for it. So you could say climb flight level 430, for example, or new route clearance, or direct. Any of the SOPs that you might have for documenting clearances, you can do within the clearance.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Next question, again, is for you. Waypoint details. This person's asking if that is editable, for example, inputting wind direction and speed.
So the data under waypoint details is not editable, and because that's the data that was used for the planning of the flight. However, what you can do is you can enter the actual wind direction, speed, temperature, turbulence, that sort of thing, as part of the position report fields that get exposed when the non-radar procedures are in use.
Got it. Thank you. Next question. Also, why not have the waypoint slash automatically after you enter the time and info signifies you passed it, this person pointed out.
Yeah, another fantastic question. So the reason why we decided not to do that, to not automate the symbology, is because it seems that operators can have slightly different SOPs. And if we were to automate the symbology, then that automation may not be in compliance with the specific SOP that you operate under. And that's why we've decided to make it a manual event to either add the circle, the slash, or the check mark.
That makes sense. And one more question for you here, Josh. Can you talk about the negative effects of loss of ownership or GPS signal within ForeFlight? And this person asks, how does that affect the usability of these features? And yeah, could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I'll answer a little bit out of order. And how does it affect the usability of the features? It really doesn't. The effect would be that you would have to manually input the coordinates for each time that we would have otherwise automatically inserted the coordinates with the present position button. As far as what the negative effects would be of the loss of ownership or GPS, the negative effects would be that you're having to manually input the data. But as far as the functionality, it remains unchanged whether the data is input manually or automatically through an ownership mechanism.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Next question is for Kelsey here. And this is something that I was really impressed by when I first saw this feature. Will it store screenshots of the map on the G&E checks? Sorry about that.
Yeah, so this is something that we wanted to kind of automate as part of this feature. So as you're recording your G&E checks, you've got the timer to remind you to record it, but it also, once you make that recording, it does kind of capture a screenshot of your route and where that position is along your route. So you've got that all compiled within your master document, and that can easily be stored and archived.
Awesome. And Greg, I think what Kelsey just said kind of flows naturally into the next question that we have, asking about how long these master documents or these logs can be saved.
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. Great question as well. So as Kelsey was just talking about, along with those, the map snapshots being captured for those G&E checks for master document capture, just having that stored, Navlogs are stored in our system indefinitely until you are actually going in and choosing to delete those. So for regulatory compliance, those will be stored indefinitely.
Awesome. And Josh, I know you didn't select this question, but I'm just going to call you out. You're writing an answer to one right now that maybe beneficial for others. So what are the two ways you can access Active Navlog again? I think you touched on it earlier, but wouldn't hurt to review it now.
Yeah, so there are two ways to access Active Navlog, like I mentioned earlier. One of the ways is through the Flights tab within ForeFlight Mobile. If you go to the Flights and you open it up, and then you open up the Navlog, the traditional Navlog that we're all familiar with, on the bottom right, you are shown a button that says Go to Active Navlog. So that would be the first way to do it. The second way to do it would be going into the ForeFlight Mobile More menu and choosing Active Navlog. And then at that point, you'll be presented with the opportunity to open the Active Navlog for the flight that you're interested in.
Great. Thank you, Josh. I'll just kind of open it up here to the three of you guys. Since we've got so many questions coming in, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Anything else you all have seen that you want to talk through before we go today?
I think one
Well,
question.
someone asked a question. Go ahead, Kelsey.
I was just going to answer a question about what's required to enable Active Navlog. I've seen a lot of questions on whether dispatch is required and how you get it added on. So just want to touch on that. So Active Navlog was a capability that we released back in May, and this is really our solution for logging your actuals, your fuel, your position plots, that kind of thing. So that was an add-on that was released, and it's $240 per user per year. Dispatch is really the solution for these advanced flight planning features. So if you're doing international crossings and you're trying to plan your ETPs or your ETOPS, then that's where dispatch comes in. And so for that reason, dispatch is required as a prerequisite in order to enable Oceanic Plotting. So it's really the combination of dispatch plus Active Navlog.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, we definitely did get a lot of questions about that. Josh, were you going to mention something as well?
Yeah, someone asked a question, are the winds forecast or actual? I'm going to assume that question is, are our flight plan wins forecast or actual? But I think it's a good opportunity. I know that in the past, some have not used ForeFlight to file flight plans or to plan flights, but plotting may change that for you. So I'll just relay some of my experience using ForeFlight as a flight planner. As you may be able to figure, I use ForeFlight exclusively for all flights, whether domestic, international. Flying a G450, so we're talking about fuel burns somewhere around 3,000 pounds an hour, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. I routinely do flights that are, 6-7 hours in length, and the most I ever see is about 250 pounds off and maybe 2 minutes off. So answering the question, our winds are forecast, and our data, once the aircraft is set up properly with weights and that sort of thing, my experience has been it's highly accurate. You can expect to be within just a few minutes and, a couple 100 pounds off as well.
Great. Thank you, Josh. I want to mention one more thing. I know Greg touched on it just a second ago, the version of ForeFlight that's required. If you wanted to update to version 15.11, you can do that. If you go into the Apple App Store, you actually have to find the ForeFlight app in there, type it in, open up the product page, showing what ForeFlight is, and then you can update from that specific page. But again, like Kelsey was talking about, you also have to have dispatch and enable Active Navlog to be able to see this within ForeFlight Mobile. I want to go over these links just one more time before we go here today. You can learn more about Oceanic Plotting and all that it includes at foreflight.com/oceanic-plotting. We also talk about, the Active Navlog aspect of this as well. You can learn more about ForeFlight Dispatch, again, which is a prerequisite to being able to use the Oceanic Plotting portion of Active Navlog at foreflight.com/dispatch. You can learn more about Jeppesen International Trip Planning Services at jeppesen.com/ITP. You can register for more webinars and watch past ones at foreflight.com/webinars. And if you don't use a third-party trip planning service, we did a webinar earlier this year on Jeppesen ITPS and how it can enhance your operations. So I'd encourage you to watch that there if that's something you're interested in. And again, you can contact the pilot support team by sending an email to team@foreflight.com. I'll also mention, Kelsey mentioned earlier, emailing sales@foreflight.com. We heard from one customer during this webinar that wanted to immediately begin using this, and they reached out to their account executive during the webinar, and they activated a trial for them immediately. So they're already set up and running with Active Navlog and Oceanic Plotting. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely email our sales team. And I know I've thrown a lot of links at you. You're also going to get all of these in an email in about an hour. So don't worry if you didn't have time to copy them all down or take a screenshot or anything. We'll make sure that those get to you. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to our presenters and for the many, many people behind the scenes who are helping answer all the questions that have come in today. We really appreciate you all being here. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for coming, and we'll see you on the next webinar.